We're not trying to compete with your everything phone, which is your iPhone or Galaxy. It's a big camera and top specs. We're going to build you something that is better at communication. It's very pocketable. It feels great in your hand. Like just holding it, it's an object you want to hold. And the way you want to use it is as your people phone, right? Put your VIP contacts on it. Do that kind of thing.
You're listening to Founder Mode,
where we talk to builders who question what progress is supposed to look like.
Today's episode's about building hardware in a world obsessed with software and why that might be the opportunity.
It's a conversation about focus, community, and launching products that feel intentional again. Kevin, take us through your phone history.
So the first mobile phone I ever saw in my life, I was probably 10 or 12 years old, and my uncle was a salesman, and would go around and sell home furnishings and stuff. And so he had a car phone.
Like the one that was like the briefcase.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And we got out of in Christmas, I remember it vividly. We went into the garage and he popped the doors open. We all got in there and there was this thing and it was like mounted in the car. It wasn't like a briefcase. It was mounted in the car.
Yeah.
And for him, it was like game changer. Went from, 5, 6 appointments today to like 10 because he wasn't having to stop and was able to coordinate up time. But personally, I got my first phone. It was cellular one. I was down in LA, 310 area code. And it was like a, kind of like a brickish type phone and kind of fat, I think it was Pacific Bell or cellular one. But my cool, like kind of smarty phone, I had a flip phone, not a Razr, but it was one of the Samsung ones early in the days. It was a Sprint phone. And that was it when I was working for OpenWave and we were doing picture messaging on that. And then went to BlackBerry at that point. And so sort of ran BlackBerry all the way to iPhone 3. So I did not
get
even
do iPhone 1.
No, sir. Never saw iPhone 1 and 2. My brother had an iPhone 1 and I was like, it's kind of cool. But I'm like, dude, you're just not as productive as me. I was like, not even I'll wait. I was just like, you're just not as productive. I'm just way too good with the keyboard.
Yeah.
And so I fought it.
You stayed on the keyboard for a while. Did you have an Android phone with a keyboard ever or no?
No, never as my primary. I've had 5 Android phones testing. Yeah, exactly. Testing or doing mobile apps or something or validating things. But yeah, never. And yeah, so never had an Android as a primary, but definitely had iPhones. And, basically, I think I've only missed one. I think I missed iPhone, maybe 10, the X.
Yeah, you just skipped one.
How about you?
Yeah, so 2013, I left Google, and the very first thing I did was I went and bought an iPhone. And so I've been iPhone ever since. But I love keyboards. I love being able to type. Our guest today, he sent me one of the Clicks keyboards, and then I bought another one, and it's awesome. It's really it is really nostalgic and really cool to be able to type again. So I know you've known other Kevin for a while. Are you stoked for this one?
I am. I mean, our guest has spent years, building one of the most devoted tech communities and sort of mobile communities, and was like a huge sort of, kind of tech, media mogul when we were kind of building
influencer before that was a thing.
Precisely. And I knew a lot about it because I was a big BlackBerry user. I was a CrackBerry reader.
Yeah.
But more importantly, as we were doing Acompli, that was one of the mechanisms, hey, we're doing mobile apps and reaching out to these various mobile communities. So it's pretty an interesting thing. So
yeah, he's now kind of asking a bigger question, right? What if the future looks a little bit more deliberate, a little bit more intentional? Should we bring him out?
Yeah, let's do it. Kevin, welcome to Founder Mode. I mean, you spent years at the center of one of tech's most loyal communities, and now you're building hardware again at the moment. And today we're talking about products, momentum, and why some deserve a second chance and maybe a better shot.
I love it. Thanks for having me on the show, guys. Great to be here. Gonna have some fun.
Yeah, let's do it. They call you CrackBerry Kevin for a reason.
That's right.
You were deep in the kind of tech media scene for over a decade. How did writing about products turn into this kind of ability to actually build them?
Yeah, sets and reps. And I guess it's the compounding effect of time that you don't realize is happening until you get old. For me, I got my first BlackBerry in 2005 when I was on a corporate job working in media, working for Canada's biggest media company at the time. And, got the addiction, the early day CrackBerry addiction, so to speak, left that company a year later, went to a new job and made all of my friends and everybody buy BlackBerries, right? And from there, that led to launching CrackBerry.com, which was a sort of silly idea at the right time. No business plan, no real vision for it, but it was a catalyst and it took off. And we built what became the biggest BlackBerry website on the internet, millions of visitors a month in the heydays and the early days of smartphones. And from there, we parlayed that into launching more properties for more of the smartphone brands, because obviously we saw what happened to Palm and we knew that, hey, when you're too big to fail, you know what can happen sometimes? Failure happens.
Yeah,
WebOS, all of them, and we built websites and communities for everything. So on the success of CrackBerry, we launched a company called Mobile Nations, and we had the biggest Android and Apple and Windows Mobile focused communities. And that was a run from 2019, being in tech media, witnessing thousands of tech product launches and building a network of people who worked for big tech for a living. And after selling that company in 2019, I took a couple of years off. I was trying to figure out what to do next, kind of put a few irons in the fire, not sure what would stick or not. And what I found was I was the most passionate about tech and hardware specifically. But it turned out by being on one side of the coin in tech media, I didn't realize I was building the capabilities to be a tech builder. And it turned out I knew amazing people at all the right places. And I had learned a lot through the years of what to do and what not to do. So we pulled it all together and now it's a dream team come together and we're building tech. And I think we'll be doing it till the day we die.
So good. So good. I was going to say, you've been part and, sort of orchestrated so many launches from sort of on the reporting and covering side. When you were going to launch this latest sort of set of products that you guys launched most recently, how did you think about that differently? And then did you think you were launching a category or did you think you were launching a product? And how much of that was sort of came to be as part of the launch or sort of we want to go do this thing and we're going to place it this way? And can you actually decide if you're launching a category or when you're launching a product, or does that sort of get sort of minted if it, hits the right resonance?
Yeah, great questions. Going into Las Vegas and CES, we as Clicks announced two products. One is an accessory. It's our new power keyboard. It's sort of a one size fits all Bluetooth keyboard and power pack for your smartphone, works with your tablet and everything else. And then we also launched Communicator, which is a full Android powered smartphone. At a glance, you're going to be like, oh, it's kind of like an old BlackBerry. But as you unpack it, you're sort of like, wait, this is something new and modern and kind of forward looking while paying homage to the past. And both products caught everybody by surprise because with power keys, it's literally an invention. This is just a clever accessory that's never been on the planet before. And that was pretty easy to name. It's a power bank. It's a keyboard. Let's call it a power keyboard. And the product speaks for itself. The utility speaks for itself. It's an impulse purchase style product and it fits into existing categories, but it's also by default kind of an invention. So it is a category of one. What was really interesting with Communicator is we knew what we were walking into, which is let's call it the ghost of BlackBerry past, right? If you see a device that has this sort of form factor, what I like to refer to as the Pop-Tart form factor, keyboard, keyboard screen, it's a little bit squat, short. At a glance, it looks like a BlackBerry from 20 feet away, right? And you can't escape that. You can't escape designing a car that looks like a Porsche. And, you've seen new people like Xiaomi in China build awesome looking cars, but from a distance, you're like, what's that new Porsche? They own that silhouette. So we knew we were going to walk into that. And we knew if we just launched Communicator as, hey, this is something for old BlackBerry fans who miss buttons, that would be a much smaller opportunity and the wrong story to tell. And to answer the question, can you launch a category? When it came into naming the product, we knew if we put the word smartphone at the end of whatever name we cooked up or phone at the end, you're going to invite comparison into the world of iPhone and Samsung and Google Pixel devices. And guess what? You're not going to win, right? That would be how you launch a product and you're done before you even sell one of them.
Nobody beats Tim Apple.
Nobody beats Tim Apple. That's right. You're 100% right. So for us, we gave a lot of thought to it. And what was really clear about the product design, how it looks different than your traditional phone, and what we're actually doing with the hardware and software features is building a purpose-built communication tool, something that says we're not trying to compete with your everything phone, which is your iPhone or Galaxy. It's a big camera and top specs. We're going to build you something that is better at communication. It's very pocketable. It feels great in your hand. Like just holding it, it's an object you want to hold. And the way you want to use it is as your people phone, right? Put your VIP contacts on it, do that kind of thing. And the word communicator came to mind. And when we looked at it more and more, we love that the word stands on its own. You look at the product, you say the name communicator, it's a little long, but so is iPhone 16 Pro Max, right? Like you just call it your iPhone. And we know that our customers are just going to call it their Clicks phone or their Clicks. So calling it communicator set it up as a category. And what happened was it worked, right? The media, customers, industry immediately kind of blessed it as, yeah, purpose-built communicators should be a new category adjacent to the smartphone. And we're seeing the opportunity just get bigger on the back of that. And there's been a lot of disconnect and intentional tech recently that's been growing the last couple of years. And we should talk about that more. But I think this sets up a new category that people understand. And it's not a either or decision. It's I have my iPhone and this new product decision, which is opportunity.
I mean, you guys are creating a category. It's exciting and bringing a category back. There's a big leap from building accessories at Clicks to now full devices. What changed internally at the company that made that leap possible?
So we kind of Miyagi'd everyone with this. So funny enough, back on, I think it was March 17th, 2023. That's when I actually registered the domain name clicksphone.com. And that was before we had registered a company, before we had our first working prototypes of our Clicks keyboard case. That was a week before I think I messaged who became my co-founder, Michael Fisher, Mr. Mobile. And that was the ambition from day one, right? If I had gone out and tried to build, well, let's say get him to join the company saying we're going to launch a phone, he would have said, "You're crazy, Kevin. Leave me alone to be a top tech YouTube creator." But that was the goal. So as we built the team and even our cap table, everybody was from the world of smartphones, built and shipped millions of phones, done it for years, if not decades. And we built a smartphone team, but we kind of said, let's validate everything along the way and build into this. I've seen a lot of projects pop up, Kickstarter, etc., where people launch a phone out of the blue and you're like, what is going on? Like, how are you going to do this? You're going to make a few thousand of them. You'll probably be out of business in 2 or 3 years, even if you actually launch the first one. And I feel like they never go to a number bigger than like that gets away from zero. You sell a few thousand units, maybe you break 10,000, but you never actually get out of the atmosphere and, build a rocket ship to the moon. So we started with the Clicks keyboard case in 2024 when we announced it for the iPhone, which was the right way to go. Going back to Las Vegas and CES, we launched this and we sold a bunch of them. And what did we do, right? We built a brand immediately. We built revenue. We got partners. We got retail partnerships like Best Buy on literally day one coming to our, hotel room in Vegas to see this thing back in 2024. We built customers. We learned what our customers loved and didn't. We saw the types of people who are using the product, including some of the biggest companies on the planet. I've said it elsewhere, so I'll say it here that the CEO of Amazon, Andy Jassy, uses Clicks daily. Like he's our low key influencer, just using the product and loves it. Once we saw that, we were able to see how the market was evolving, and we always had the idea for the phone. So the phone was there. We had designs. I've got designs that have never been seen to the world of what we would have maybe shipped in 2024 versus 2025. And when we saw where everything was going with more products hitting the market over the last 18 months, probably in partial reason due to the success of Clicks, that gave us kind of the aha moment where supply chain, timing, and everything lined up. And then we kind of got the ability to do what we wanted to do from day zero, which is let's get the phone going now. And that's what we're doing.
That being something that actually increases not only the focus of the product that you're building, but also how you're designing, right? And we're hearing like a lot of the AI companies talking about like, userless devices or audio only devices, like all these things that are going to not only is the keyboard going to go away, but the screen's going to go away. And this thing's going to just be, an ambient blob that sits on my desk that I just talk to and it just interacts. Like, how have you guys thought about it where your piece plays? And then, maybe there's something that we can get to later about where this goes.
It's just, if you try to invent the future and you're trying to predict where all these rapid new advancements are going, man, it takes you time to build the product, do the R&D, do the software. So like from where you start to where you launch, it's not a static thing that doesn't move. The world is constantly changing. So when you actually announce the product, you need to have everything right if you're going to get the right product at the right time and make it become the future at that moment. And if you don't, you're going to run out of money, maybe sell a bunch, but they're going to end up in a drawer. Which, Jason, how many products do you have in your office right now that you don't use?
I don't want to talk about it.
Right. Same, right? And I think the thing that happened with Clicks, which is so funny and where we flew under the radar, is with a product like this, when we announced it in 2024 publicly, got a lot of buzz because obviously it's bringing buttons back. It's a bit of nostalgia. However, there is that audience who wants it for the productivity features and everything. But by catering to an underserved market in the past, you were guaranteed business revenue and a customer base that allowed us to build a team and do R&D and actually have company level discussions as a young company around where the future is going. And when I look at the distant future of maybe screenless world, I'm like, yeah, there's obviously recording devices that are screenless now. I'm sure you guys both have your Plod AI recorders or pins and those types of things. But the thing is, the screen for a long time is still going to be the best interface because we like to share. We're humans. If you go out to your whatever kids recital tonight and another friend is there and you want to show them photos of something you took on the weekend, the meal you cooked or the thing you just bought or whatever, like you kind of need to pull something out of your pocket and show it off. And I'm pretty sure that exists in the world for quite a while. So with something like Communicator, you could look at it, and if you didn't look closely, you might be like, oh, cool, buttons. They brought back the past again, but now on a phone. But in some ways, this button on the side becomes the future because what we've built here is really a handheld communicator that fits way better in your hand than any flagship smartphone on the market. And this is your notification light as well to show you when something's really important. It's your signal. But this button is sort of becoming a platform for AI, voice, etc., right? So press and hold to talk, voice dictate, let go to send the message. So if I don't want to type on the go and compose, I can just brain dump into ChatGPT, let go and send. Obviously, Whisper Flow, which I use a lot on my desktop computer, is not on Android yet. It's on iPhone. The implementation is, I think, pretty hokey. Apple's not going to let go of that and make it easier for them unless they acquire them at some point. But man, would I love to put Whisper Flow into this? Absolutely, right?
Have you guys talked to him yet?
We've got lots. I can't disclose all the things, but I mean, all the partnerships of what you can start to integrate are there. But even from a hardware perspective, if you're going to buy this as a complement to your iPhone or Android phone, and maybe right now you have the Plod AI recorder you stick on the back of the device, and you have to use their service, double click, start your AI voice recorder. We put microphones on the back and front so you can lie this on the table. And, one of the things I always see against, say, a Plod device is, well, I could just use an app on my iPhone and I don't need to buy a separate recorder. But if there's 4 of us sitting in a meeting and we want to record it, nobody wants to put their primary smartphone down on the table and not have it during the meeting recording. So what do you have? A secondary complementary phone that does a hell of a lot more than a dedicated voice recorder, but double click voice recorder, microphoned up, bang, does the same thing. And we can partner with different providers. So if you're an Otter person and not a Plod person or something else, you build that in. So this becomes, a foot in the past, a product that's very much of 2026, 2027 on the back of, I'd say, the rise of intentional tech and people realizing they need something to sometimes put down their iPhone and just have a more focused work device. But this doesn't punish you and limit what you can do with it. And then when you go into the future of like AI tools and that, how do we start to integrate them? And when you see things like this, we started talking about them years ago. So the things that you'll have me back on the podcast to talk about next year and the year after,
100%.
they just move us down the line, but we got to execute. We did a great job of hype building, and now this year is heads down, get the work done, get the products out, and make sure you guys love them.
Yeah, that's right. You mentioned Plod a few times. It's funny. Kevin and I both bought the Limitless, which just was acquired by Meta, which of course is now limited. So
right.
Here we are. But that's just part of the tale of these hardware businesses, right? So you're a storyteller, Kevin, and I think first and foremost, you just did an AMA. You were saying before we get started, literally right before this, you were at CES, kind of bringing this back and kind of taking over the show again for a second time with new Clicks products. You've said that product storytelling matters maybe just as much or more than the product itself. How early did you start thinking about? I mean, you said you bought the domain in 2023. Like, how early did you start thinking about this narrative?
So if I go back to the Clicks launch of our keyboard case, we announced it publicly on January 4th, 2024. We knew that was the date we were going to launch the product probably 9 months in advance before we had working prototypes. Like our go-to-market plan was baked. If we couldn't be far enough along as a company, I probably would have tried to shelf it until the next year. And part of that is when you have a show like CES, the world's media is coming there looking for tech stories. They want to tell tech stories. And if you can architect the right momentum there, you can build a giant snowball, out of it, right? You start with something small, but if you actually get it rolling, it'll take off. And I think a lot of brands go there. We do it probably in the most economical manner possible. We don't go buy a big flashy booth on the show floor, hoping for people to, the right person to walk by to tell our story. We do it in a way where, we have our own hotel suite. We start inviting people, months in advance. The way we do the rollout of the information in the lead up just prior to the show and everything gets it out, and we get kind of 2 bites of the apple. And when you see that approach work the first time, we kind of followed our own playbook the second time and it works again. And part of it is to, even in things like your media kit and press kit, make it easy for people who can't be there to get the assets that they're going to need to be able to remix and tell their own story, because you have a planet full of content creators now who, their job is to tell cool stories, awesome and early, if they want to pop on the algorithm. So if you set up everybody for success, your success is guaranteed. And I think a lot of the products that go to these shows just don't do that. So we definitely focus on not just the storytelling of the product, but actually that go-to-market rollout for announcements. And I think, I see a lot of cool products that are not getting the attention they deserve. And it's kind of, I don't want to say their fault, but I feel like they think they're doing the right things. But this is where, having lived on the other side of the tech media coin for so long, attending this event, watching thousands of events, you kind of realize what actually matters and what doesn't. And a lot of people will spend a lot of money on the things they think matters to find out after the fact it didn't do nearly as much for them. And for us, we've tried some of those bigger box things as well the last couple of years. And guess what? They don't work as well as when we're kind of like a little bit crafty, take a little bit, more measured approach, but start really early and know exactly what we want to do.
Yeah. I mean, you talked about spending money. I'm curious a bit about raising it. And so you guys have taken a quite different path, I think, to fundraising as a lot of companies have so far. How do you guys sort of mix in the way you've bootstrapped, kind of partner, but then also you leveraged a community both as customers, but also as kind of a megaphone?
We never raised a penny. And if we had raised money, there's no way we would have, meandered the ups and downs of the media world to get to an exit. So it was by necessity a bootstrapped business. And we only invested in risk once we already banked money doing the safe thing that worked. And that could be a podcast episode on its own to really dive into the world of bootstrapping. So I think for myself and for my business partner and CEO, Adrian, we're both of a mentality of less is more, bootstrap, maybe think of it as seed strap, take on the least money needed, prove things out. And, once you de-risk, you can always get growth capital as you need to. But obviously building phones and things like that require more dollars than, building websites and doing content. It's a different category of business. So we kind of tried everything at the start. When we raised our first pre-seed round in 2023, it came after we just self-funded the project, right? And I in my head, businesses can fail. You can try a lot of projects, and if they don't work out, you don't care. So when we were developing this at the start, we just self-funded it through the prototype phase. I wanted to get in my hands and see if it would work physically, conceptually. And then once we decided to build the product, the first thing we did was we did a really strategic friends and family pre-seed round. And it wasn't actual friends and family, but it was industry friends and family. So we went to a lot of our ex-BlackBerry friends who had, 15 years earlier, 10 years earlier, left BlackBerry to go to work at companies like Apple and Samsung and Facebook and Google and, go a level up in terms of their expertise and probably dollars in the bank account, but people we would be able to call on when needed to help us as we proved out what we were doing and grew. So it was almost like a price of admission to be part of the clicks, whatever we're building early on when we were still in stealth mode. So that got us our first kind of pre-seed round from all people who could help if needed. We could call them if needed for advice, but also they weren't going to cry if it didn't work out, right? Because they all knew what they were getting into from a risk and product perspective. And then when we launched in 2024, we drove a lot of revenue straight away, right? D2C orders the moment we went live, purchase orders from retailers. Maybe we almost grew a little too quick in that respect. We should have kept things tighter on the D2C side. So we were able to do a lot of self-funding of the business through 2024. And, then when we kind of learned, because question one was, is this just a product that we want to scale to the moon, or do we want to invest in future roadmap and start building? Once we had that decision of we want to position ourselves to be able to do even bigger things, then we start to go down the fundraising path. And the question was, okay, how's this going to work? Are we going to get money from VCs? We have a lot of hype around us. Maybe this will work. And we did start talking to a lot of VCs. We even went to Startup Grind in San Francisco last year. We won Growth Startup of the Year, which was this massive accolade. We did talk to more VCs. And what we found out was, VCs probably are scared of hardware, a lot of them. If you don't have a lot of words like AI happening at the time we started talking to them, they weren't necessarily wanting to look at it right away. And at that point, they weren't sure, is this something like a fad, or is it actually a category that's going to be there? So we weren't getting VC interest the way, maybe you would have hoped. And we kind of went back into our playbook, and we talked to some of our advisors, sort of informal friends of the industry in that. And one of them, who is a CEO of, big tech company, like $1 billion plus company, who I knew from the BlackBerry days, he said, Kevin, go back to what you did before. He's like, you guys were doing this right in 2009, 2012. Community. He's like, do content. Like, people know you. Like, you quit blogging. You haven't been this guy that you'll be surprised how many people know you if you just put out there and ask.
So coming back to like this community that you've built, this revival of kind of the BlackBerry old tech, the keyboard, there's a lot of skeptics out there. And, as a member of the media and now somebody who's trying to convince them that you're right, a lot of people say, revivals aren't going to work. They never work. How do you separate this skepticism, of kind of bringing back BlackBerry in the form of the Clicks Communicator from this vision and this bigger kind of vision that you have?
Yeah. So with bringing back BlackBerry, I think now it's not the goal, right? We've gone beyond it. But what the notion of bringing back BlackBerry last year did was it kind of allowed us to shake the BlackBerry tree, or the BlackBerry bush, so to speak, and see what would fall out of it. And we had hundreds of calls over the last 6 months with people from the industry, people who turned out to be investors and become investors, from fans, from partners, suppliers, et cetera, who want to see this revival happen. And, coming to funding, while the VC approach was not crystal clear, what we found as we showed people our roadmap was that they kind of said, wow, yeah, we don't need to bring back BlackBerry. We love what you're bringing to market. How do I become part of that? So we were able to do our seed round really with fans of Clicks and what we were building, but people who appreciated what they were missing in that world to be involved as part of the story. So that got us through our funding round. Now, when I come to what's happening in the market today, it's been crazy. I actually have not seen a lot of skepticism right now. Now, where I think there's misunderstanding is a lot of people don't know what the scale of success looks like in 2026 for launching a phone or a smartphone. And it's easy to remember stories like Essential Phone, Andy Rubin, the guy who started Android, who, I think spent a couple $100 million to try to compete against iPhone with a really sexy Android device, and it didn't work, obviously. So if he can't do it, how is it possible that a startup brand or somebody smaller can come into it? And I think the economies of how we operate are very different. If you look at things tactically, like, what are your minimum order quantities? How are you going to sell? It's not that it's not big numbers still, but it's much more achievable probably than some people think if you do it correctly the right way. So I think that's a misconception. Is like, how are you going to compete against iPhone, Samsung, et cetera? You're crazy. It's like, well, no, you just don't actually understand how the industry works anymore. You're working off of, 2011, 2015 data and not the modern day economics of building hardware and how things can come together from chipset and displays, et cetera, to pull a product together. I think the second part of it is don't compete, come and. And that's where, by defining a category of, this is a purpose-built communicator for people who are iPhone people and have a Galaxy or a Pixel, that question is very different, and that consideration is very different. We already know we have succeeded. The question will just be how much we succeed, because we were able to smash our MOQs literally in less than 48 hours. From for us, the actual hard work is kind of done. Where we are on our sales forecast for the year, 2 weeks into January, we were able to basically pass month 7, 8 of our sales forecast, where we're expecting, and all organically without a penny spent on advertising. So we already know, right? Now it's a matter of, hey, you have carriers knocking on your door, you have retailers knocking on your door. And I think navigating the growth and not opening the wrong doors or maybe some doors too soon, that is the magic we need to navigate, and where I'm glad we have a lot of people to call on for advice and help, because not everything's a crystal clear answer, and you kind of want to say yes to everything, but that would probably set you up to make mistakes. So I think we're very focused now on deliver great product, focus on quality. We already know from the demand side that, all of our signals, indicators, and actual sales, on reservations and orders, like are knocking it out of the park from where our forecast was between the pessimistic, optimistic, and realistic expectations. We are multiples higher than optimistic. So that problem is solved, right? You couldn't ask for a better start to 2026. So really it's about delivery now and just the right way to scale over years 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I think, I've definitely bought a lot of Kickstarter things that haven't come. And I've bought, I've also pre-ordered a lot of things that I don't know if they ever came. I forgot, right? Like, and so like, what are sort of the non-negotiable mistakes, like sitting in your chair today, knowing that we've all got orders for this thing? Like, when is it going to come? And what are the things that you could do wrong or you've seen other people do wrong? And how are you guys going to prevent that sort of like, negative Kickstarter story? Because I think there's still some that I'm on that like people still chime in periodically and I somehow get comments and haven't unsubscribed where they're still mad that the thing hasn't come 3 years later and the company's bankrupt and shut down and smoked the $2 million trying to deliver something and didn't get there. But I'm curious like how you guys are looking at that, sitting on what I would imagine is a mountain of pre-order cash, and like this expectation window will ebb and flow over how you manage it over the coming weeks and months to the point that, does this thing overachieve and sort of like deliver beyond people's expectations?
Yeah, great question. So I think that's one of the biggest things that we always think about, and we've done a lot of sets and reps. So if I go back to even clicks with our initial rollout for iPhone and Android, we did a similar thing, which was announce in January and ship a few months later. And what you learn is everything will always be a little harder and take a little longer than you want it to. So that's where, if you have a date in mind that you're targeting for, in the beginning, you just don't give an exact date because it's going to end up probably missing by a couple weeks and that kind of thing. So in the case of our keyboard, right? The power keys, we said ships in spring to make sure we have that window there where when things take a little bit longer, that you're kind of covered, and the exact
spring in
shipping dates
Chicago, spring in San Francisco.
Yeah, it's going to be spring. But that's a product that has gone through all the stages. You've been using the product for a long time now. It's really just about that final, how many do we need to build? And having that buffer of time to make sure your supply chain builds enough, because it really is a thing you plan around. And in our case, if you were doing a lower volume, you would be able to sort of send out your first batch as kind of like your early founder, early adopter batch, be really, really generous with everybody. If they have issues, like it's fine, it's going to happen. It's a little bit more that Kickstarter-y thing, and then fix it before you scale. In our case with Power Keyboard, which has really been like, it's hard not to want to talk about the phone a lot, but I can't overstate how killer that product is. It is just such an impulse, no-brainer tech gadget buy that has a really high volume to it, and it obviously comes up first. So we've added a few extra weeks into that process of just final testing as you go from your like DVT to PVT, like your final samples as you build the manufacturing lines and go, just to make sure you have something that's rock solid for day one. And as those roll out of the factory, like I will stay in China that month to just make sure nothing fades as you're going through all the way through. So you just have to do it. But I think the biggest thing is we've done a lot of sets and reps. The supply chain, the factory, everybody we've been working with is years. These aren't our first products, so that we succeed together. And that helps solve your problems, because it's not like you're showing up and if you miss something on quality or timeline, that we as a company only feel it. Everybody feels that. So it brings out the best of everyone. So I think quick answer would be have a team that has all of the incentives aligned to deliver quality and to deliver on time, and don't commit to big things until you've done your sets and reps and made the mistakes on smaller things, which we've done. So I feel really confident about it. And that's what we're focused on this year.
I like it. And with that, like, where can people get on the train, follow the movement, and more importantly, if they haven't already, put their pre-orders in?
Yeah, head to clicks.tech, or if you like to, and it's easier to remember, you can head to clicksphone.com, which will take you to the Communicator page and order. Would love it if you join the journey this year as we go, and it's going to be fun. And for me, follow CrackBerry Kevin. I'm kind of active on LinkedIn in terms of the storytelling of the business as we build it and go, which I think is pretty interesting from a founder perspective. And people can always DM me there. Love talking to founders and sharing my advice where I have it.
Kevin, this was a lot of fun. Thank you for joining us. That was a strong one, a kind of full blueprint on how hardware actually gets built without fantasy math.
Yeah, no nostalgia bait, just reps, timing, and knowing where not to compete.
Yeah, the category framing really landed for me. Communicator, not just another phone.
That single decision explains like half the strategy.
All right, Kevin, what are your top 5 on this one?
So number 1, compounding reps, turn that media exposure into a product advantage. Number 2, accessories kind of validated the demand before committing to a full hardware build. 3, category naming matters more than really the specs at launch. And then 4, CES wins are planned months ahead, not just like accidental. And finally, like, hardware success comes from incentives, sequencing, and quite frankly, some restraint.
If this episode made you rethink your relationship with devices or attention, share it with someone who's craving focus.
And subscribe to Founder Mode for more conversations about building things that actually matter. That's it for today, because sometimes the fastest way forward is putting your hands back on the keyboard.